So we've looked at how, people have sort of alterations in their posture. We're going to observe that so that we know what exercises to perform, right? So until now, a lot of our fitness assessment conversation has been focused around the idea of like how we can use our fitness assessments to determine which exercises to give our clients, right? Like if I see a client whose knees cave in, I know that I'm going to stretch the adductors, and like that's what's going to build their warm up for them. If I see a client whose cardiovascular exercise, or 3-minute step test is just poor, scoring really poorly, that's going to tell me, oh, I'm going to prioritize cardiorespiratory exercise. It's a client that I'm probably going to do circuit training with, or limited rest periods or higher repetitions, so I can build up their cardiovascular efficiency, right? So we've used all of our assessment data so far in order to inform like what exercises we're going to give our clients. And that's great, right? Like clients who are, landing in the poor category get zone 1 cardio. Clients who land in the average category get zone 2 cardio. Clients who land in the excellent category get zone 3. The anterior pelvic tilt, you get a kneeling hip flexor stretch, like pretty basic stuff. But now we are actually kind of moving out of that. And as we're getting to the end of this class and through this module where, I like to affectionately refer to this as the sports mod, right? We're going to get further and further into training athletes, right? So now we have to have like, what about like the really high level assessment stuff, that's really just meant to be you versus maybe anybody else you're trying out for, or trying out against rather that day. Or maybe it's just you versus future you, maybe you just want to know like whether or not you are improving your athleticism. So we're going to look at 2 primary assessments today, and that's actually it in terms of like new content. We're just going to kind of work our way through 2 more little assessments, and then we're going to see several more like postural distortions. The PowerPoint slides are limited, but so for performance assessments, this is a new category, right? We've had of our categories, and these categories, by the way, are not important. Like they're not going to ask you like where certain exercises fall. So don't feel like you have to memorize this category, but just to kind of make it clear, have a distinction between what we've talked about. We talked about, physiologic assessments as a category, right? That's heart rate and blood pressure stuff. We talked about body composition. We talked about the posture assessments, both static and dynamic, and cardiorespiratory assessments. And now we're into performance, right? So performance isn't meant to be, oh, this is, you perform 16 touches, that means I'm going to give you this exercise, right? That's not really what this is for. Instead, it's more like, all right, you know what? Eric, welcome to your first day. Let's go ahead and have you do this performance assessment. All right, you got 19 touches, really good. I'll explain what touches are in a minute. Really good. All right, and let's go ahead and move on. And so we write it down. Then we train our client for 4 weeks, and we're like, all right, you remember that assessment that we did last time where you had to touch the shoulder and do the shoulder taps? Let's do the same thing and see if you do any better, right? And then this time you do it and it's like, bam, 24 touches. Like that's an improvement, right? So it's literally just a way of tracking progress, you versus future you. Technically, a performance assessment can be literally anything as long as you can control the variables and repeat that assessment consistently and look, track progress, looking for improvement, right? So this is a really good way for us to sort of track our clients' athletic progress, right? There really is no standard table for how well they should be able to perform, but it's a really excellent way to see improvements over time. So for instance, those of you who remember going through performance assessments in the youth class, youths have a little bit of a different like priority. We're not really worried as much about like their posture, because chances are like, they haven't really been around long enough to have like bad alterations in their posture. And so when it comes to like training kids, we do one of these really cool assessments called the right angle push-up test. And it is so much harder than you would think it would be, even if you're really good at push-ups. Like, I'm sure somebody out there was like, I don't know, I'm really great at push-ups, you know, like how hard could it possibly be? But what makes it very, very difficult is the fact, if we look, actually, I'll look up the protocols for this test here because it's just a very good example. Let's see, right angle push-up test. Oh, protocols. Where is the amount of time? Well, there it is. So the idea is that you're actually going to do it at a very specific tempo. Okay. So what you do is you actually set a timer. You can actually use a metronome, which you would have handy from doing like the 3-minute step test. But if you set a metronome to 20 beats per minute, what that does is that's going to go off once every 3 seconds. So this is a very slow metronome. But I challenge you guys to try to do 1 push-up every 3 seconds and just see how many push-ups you can do, because it won't be nearly as many as it normally is, right? So like, listen here. That's 1, 2, 3, you know, like, and so it's a little slow. It's like, and you're just holding it there. You're like holding it the entire time, and it's really quite difficult. Because like of all that isometric time, you know, downtime between repetitions, the exercise starts to get harder and harder and harder. So if you feel like you can do like 60 push-ups, try to do them going that slow. It's very, very difficult. So it's kind of a fun, type of assessment to actually do. For kids, that 3 seconds is pretty much, it's very well filled because kids move a little bit slower in their push-ups and stuff. And that's why they do it that way. But for adults, it's kind of a fun one, you know. I had a client who I've had a couple different times where I've had clients sort of come up with their own performance assessments. They don't know that they're performance assessments, but they've sort of come up with like a fun way to do things. Like I had I had like a married couple that were seniors that I used to train, and they read something in AARP magazine or some article. I want to say it was AARP, but like they read some article about how one of the ways you can tell if you are like fit as a senior is if you can get up from the floor without using any assistance. You know, like grabbing like a table or grabbing like a thing. And so like they had that, they were like, we want to see how well, you know, we can get up from the ground. And like, so it was like a timed thing. So we're like, all right, well, we need to have like a standard way to test this. So we're going to have you lay on your back, face up, feet shoulder width apart, arms facing forward. So I basically put them in the anatomic position, but like on the ground. And then it was like, all right, well, you know, and I had a stopwatch and I timed them. And then we did like a big agility workout over the next 4 weeks, and then timed them again and watched all their times get shorter, you know, like they both got faster at being able to get up off the ground. And it was kind of a fun little assessment that they both enjoyed, you know, like, because they had like had a conversation about it or something. I think they're also senior. These clients were very old, by the way. I think they're also senior aged. Daughter had like mentioned it, and that's kind of how it came to pass. And so they were like, you know, challenging her. These were the 2 most like competitive old folks like you've ever met in your life, by the way. And then we took it a step further, and I was like, all right, well now let's see if we can get up from the ground without using your hands at all. And so we took it like way further, and that was like much more challenging. So they had to lay on the ground and figure out how to get up from the ground without like using their hands, right? And that seems like really easy, but you know, let me just show you here. It can be pretty challenging, right? So like it involves like learning how to like sit upright tuck your leg under and then like stand up. And I kind of, did it a little bit of a different way than I would have had them do it. I would have had them lunge. So what we did with my, I think I want to say 80, like top 80s, like 87 at least, year-old clients for the month was we did like Turkish get-ups. If you've ever like messed around with this exercise here before, it's a really terrific total body exercise using a kettlebell. We didn't use a kettlebell. We actually used a dumbbell instead. But basically what you do is it's you lay down and you learn how to like hold this overhead as you like use your arm, you roll from one side to the other and like you stand up. And it's a really terrific total body, very core based exercise. And so we practiced that for I think 8 weeks on that one. It took a while to kind of master because that was a particularly challenging thing. But sure enough, like their times both got better, if I remember right, Vic couldn't actually even do, he couldn't even like actually do it. He got like a no content like the first time. But then eventually like we sort of worked our way up to it. So that's kind of what performance assessments are. You guys can make up your own performance assessments as long as the protocols are clear and that you can retest consistently. That's the key here. Now in your textbook, we're going to look at sort of 2 main performance assessments that we've got. Okay, we are going to look at what's called the Davies Test, which is an upper body agility assessment, and then we're going to look at the Shark Skill Test, which is a lower body agility assessment. Okay, so let's take a look at how this works here. Okay. Is this the one I like, or is it this guy? If I remember right, this guy's volume is super low. Oh no, this guy does a very good job. I remember this video. Okay.
This is the Davies Test. The Davies Test is used to measure an athlete's upper extremity agility and stabilization. What we're going to do is take 2 pieces of tape and place them 36 inches apart on the floor. From here, assume the push-up position with each hand on a piece of tape. You'll then transfer one hand to the other, tapping the hand and then returning back to the starting position. You'll alternate hands quickly, trying to touch each side as quickly as possible for 15 seconds. We'll perform this test 3 times to get an accurate measurement. This is how it's done. This is the Davies Test.
Okay, so pretty darn simple. So all you're going to do when you're having your client do this is you're going to set a piece of tape 36 inches apart. And by the way, guys, 36 inches is the number that's like in your textbook. It's sort of the classic way to do it. I have modified this a million times depending on the size and shape of my client. Not everybody is going to be able to like have like a very easy 36-inch wingspan. This is one of the reasons though why this is a test of like them versus future them. It's not meant to be there's not like a standard number they should be able to get. But basically the way this works is you're going to pick, 36 inches, 30 inches, 24 inches, whatever number you choose. And then they're going to place their hands on that. I always tell them specifically which finger I want them to, place to touch that tape with, because that's where we want them to like, you don't want them to go from index finger one time and then like, pinky fingers the next. That makes the assessment easier. So obviously they're going to improve. Or you certainly don't want it to go the other way. You don't want them to start on their pinkies the first time they ever take the test and then go to index fingers, because that makes it harder. And it's like you've been training them for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or however long, and then all of a sudden they're doing worse. Like we're not trying to lose progress here, right? So you have them place their hands on. Me personally, I like to use like either middle finger or like index finger, and then they're going to reach across and touch their opposite hand. So they're in that plank position, and then they reach across and they touch here, and then they go back. That's 1 point, and then they reach across and they touch again. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., right? So they're going to move back and forth, and you're going to do as many reps as they can in 15 seconds. You're going to record. You're going to repeat it 3 times. However, you're only going to record 2 of them. So like the first one is a practice round. That way, you know, you give them a chance to kind of get an idea for it and explain to them, you know, that it's a practice round. Say, hey, we're going to learn how to do this. Here's a practice round. And then, you know, have them rinse and repeat. And the reason we do this assessment is it is an upper body agility assessment. So like we're going to be talking about agility a lot this mod later down the line. But what the difference between like agility and speed and quickness and things like that is, agility is your ability to change direction as fast as possible. So this is like agility in the upper body. It's almost, you know, like bear crawling in some capacity, right? So that's all this assessment is. It's really just going to be them versus like future them, you know. Give them 60 seconds between each round and then like repeat. And this is another example of like an assessment that I personally really, really love, because this is a really good way for you to make your client feel like they're getting a little bit of a workout in the middle of, you know, this fitness assessment. And again, like, you know, you think about like what our goals are during a fitness assessment. Obviously, it's to be able to like learn about our clients so that we can make informed decisions when it comes to like writing a workout. But also, like, a lot of times I'm trying to sell myself because I want to, you know, get this person signed up for training. And so I want them to feel like they're getting kind of a workout on that first day. I want them to feel like they're getting their money's worth for driving all the way down to the gym and, you know, signing up for this 1 hour session, right? And so, like, if I can do their overhead squat and I can do a pushing and a pulling assessment, and I have them do a 3-minute step test or maybe a 1 mile Rockport walk test walk, right? And I have them do this Davies test, by the end of it, they're going to feel like they got somewhat of a workout, even though we only spent maybe 20 or 30 minutes on the gym floor itself. And the rest of it, we spent interviewing, we spent talking, and probably me giving them a sales pitch, you know? So that is, honestly, that's it. That's the Davies test, right? It's nothing too crazy. It's just an upper body agility assessment. And the idea here is that it's assessing your upper body stabilization, right? And obviously not everybody has proper stabilization, so this might not be appropriate for every client. You know, if you notice that during the pushing and pulling assessment, there's like a lot of dysfunction. If the overhead squat, they can't even get their arms up, right? If you know this person has like a lot of upper body dysfunction, then, you know, you're probably not going to do the Davies test. But if you've got like an athlete or like a younger client who's like interested in just tracking their progress, this is a really kind of fun, engaging assessment that's going to be good for that, you know. And so then we can build a routine, you know, maybe build some exercises into our routine that's going to help with improving the athleticism, you know, things like shoulder tap planks, for instance, or up down planks, you know, the plank push-ups, I think some people call them, you know, stuff like that is going to be really, really good for this. And then anytime they're working on like upper body scaption and other things, you know, that's going to see improvement as well. So yeah, so that is the Davies test, one of 2 of our performance assessments. But does anybody have any questions on how this test works or what it's for, or, you know, anything like that so far? Everybody's feeling pretty good. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this one's pretty simple. Okay. Let's look at the harder of the 2. And well, in my opinion, I think the next one's harder personally. Some people will say like Davies Test is, and by the way, like if you have wrist problems, like Davies Test, totally out of the question, not awesome. Change it up, you know, go with a different version. But here we go. Here's the shark skill test. So the shark skill test is a little bit more challenging, not physically. I actually think the shark skill test is easier physically, but I think it is much harder in general because like it's almost frustrating. So this is a performance assessment that's all about lower extremity agility. Okay, so we have our 2 agility tests here now, right? We got the Davies test, which is upper body agility. We have our shark skill test, which is the lower body agility. And so this is very much a progression from like the single leg squat, right? So you remember how we did like the overhead squat, we looked at their posture. We did the single leg squat to test whether or not they can maintain posture and balance simultaneously. Well, now we're going to go ahead and remove posture from the equation, but let's see how well they can maintain balance in sort of an extreme scenario here, right? So you're going to have your client stand on one leg in a center box. And then what they're going to do is they're going to have to jump into every other box in sort of a specified order, right? So like if my client is, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and just make like a 9x9 grid here. Sorry, not a 3x3 grid. So it's a 9-box grid here, right? So this is where my client's going to start. We'll go ahead and put them, you know, in here. And then what you're going to have them do is you're going to go in a very specified order. Me personally, if this is my client's, you know, if this is the way my client is facing, you know, this over here is the front. So now I'm doing this from like my perspective, right? I personally, if I'm on my left leg, I like to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. And that's the last box when I am on my left. And when I'm on my right, I like to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's how I like to do it personally. I like to center box and then go around to the outside in the same direction as my leg. So if I'm on my left, I like to go up and to the left. And if I'm on my right, I like to go up and to the right. And that's the way I like to do it. I kind of don't necessarily recommend it, but that's the way I've done it for years. And so like, I'm not going to stop now because again, consistency is key. I don't want to pick up with a client, you know, and forget what protocol I gave them. So what I kind of recommend just picking like one simple pattern and doing it that way. But you could technically do whatever pattern you want, right? You could go, you know, 1 and then, you know, finish out like all the lateral ones first and then do the diagonal ones. I've seen people do that. To me, that's very weird, but hey, to each their own, you know? So here's the thing. You are also always going to return to the center square. So let me go ahead and just erase all that there. You're always going to return to the center square whenever you do this. So if you start here, you're going to jump over to here and then back. And then you're going to go here and then back and then back out to here, back to center, out to the corner, back to center, etc. Right? So you always, always, always return to the center square while you're doing this between every repetition. So obviously something where we're jumping on one leg and trying to jump into like little tiny 12-inch boxes is pretty difficult. So this isn't necessarily suitable for every single client, right? But here's our setup, right? Position your client in the center box of a grid with hands on their hips, standing on one leg. And that grid should be 3 by 3, and every box should be 12 inches by 12 inches, okay? So this is a, I guess, you know, a 12-inch by 12-inch box here, which means, do you guys know I was part architect? Clearly. So this is 3 feet by 3 feet. And so you're going to have your hands on your hips, and then what they're going to do is they're going to jump in that pattern. And this is not how many touches they can get in 15 seconds, which is how the Davies test worked, right? It was however many touches in 15 seconds. This one is how fast they can get through all of the boxes. So this is almost like a race, right? You're just going to hit a stopwatch, start it, and you're just going to time them to see how long it takes. And then there are penalties which extend their time. So you run the stopwatch, you end it, and while you're watching them, you're going to pay attention, and you're going to just count the number of penalties, just count on your fingers, that they get. They're going to get a penalty for their non-hopping leg touching the ground. So if they're standing on their right and then their left leg touches the ground, that's a penalty. And they bring it back up and keep going. They're going to get a penalty if their hands come off their hips. They're going to get a penalty if their foot goes into the wrong square, and if they do not return to the center square. Those are the 4 things that give them penalties. Now, just to show you what this sort of looks like, right? Let's go ahead and watch somebody actually doing this. So this guy's going to do it. I like this video here, but these boxes are huge, way bigger than they're supposed to be. So it is supposed to be each box is supposed to be 12 inches by 12 inches. Like your kind of classic, like, you know, like linoleum tile in most businesses, right? They're like those 12-inch boxes, right? That's actually the perfect size. These boxes are massive. Or this guy is miniaturized, one of the two. But here's how this works.
The shark skill test is designed to assess agility and neuromuscular control of the lower extremity, and is a progression from the single leg squat test. The setup of the test requires 9 12 by 12 inch boxes placed in a 3 by 3 pattern. The starting point of the test is in the center square. The athlete stands hands on hips and on one leg. The test is performed by hopping into each box in the designated pattern, always returning to the center square before moving on to the next in the sequence. Prior to the test, the athlete should perform 2 practice runs, one with each foot in the designated pattern to ensure they understand the test going forward. Once the athlete is set, perform a time test as quick as possible. The clock starts on their movement into the first box and ends when the athlete lands in the center square after completion of the designated pattern. Time testing is performed twice on each foot, alternating after each test. If at any time during the test the non-hopping leg touches the ground, the hands come off the hips, the hopping foot goes into the wrong square, or does not return to the center square, a 1/10 of a second penalty is added to their time. The pros of the test include it being quick and easy to set up and to perform with minimal equipment required. The results give a good basis on the athlete's agility and neuromuscular control of the lower extremity. The cons of the test include the test not being suitable for individuals suffering from injury in the hopping leg of the knee or ankle due to the physical requirements of the test. The potential of human error with the time of performance is also a problem with this test.
Okay. It's so funny. I always have to watch, like, it's so clear that like some of the videos that I pull up online are just like college students. They're probably doing it for extra credit or something. So that is how we do it, right? You can see he's gonna jump from every box. So again, it's not necessarily appropriate for every single client, you know. This is definitely a progression from from the single leg squat, right? But you're going to give them a practice round on their left, give them a practice round on their right. Now, it doesn't have any protocol for like how much time to give them between sets. Me personally, I usually give them 60 seconds. So like I'll explain how to do it, and then I'll have my client do it on their left and then immediately do it on their right with no rest. Then I'll give them like 60 seconds of rest and be like, all right, let's go ahead and try again. This time we're going to score you, you know? And so I'll have them do that for a score on that next round. And again, this is just a really good way to kind of track your progress over time. If your client's actually improving their agility, they're getting a little bit better at like balance, and they're getting better at controlling their core, and they're getting a little bit better at jumping in general. Well, now it's like, okay, great. Now let's see if we can get some directional change in there, you know? Give them some ice skaters and give them like single leg balance exercises, all that stuff that's going to improve this. And you are going to watch like their numbers get shorter and shorter over time. And it's a really kind of fun performance assessment to do. So those are kind of the two major performance assessments that we've got as we're looking at it. There's definitely more out there. We're going to teach you guys a lot of the ones that are in the sports assessment handbook, sports assessment chapter in the sports textbook at the end of this mod. You know, obviously anybody out there who watches like the NFL or the NBA, you know that like there's the NFL combine, right? Like, and they have a high jump test, they have a long jump test, they have a bench press test. Any of those things are considered performance assessments as well. You could make one up. You could do the get up from the floor without using your hands assessment like I did. You could, you know, anything that's important to your client can become sort of a performance assessment, right? If your client did a 1 mile run and is just trying to, you know, get faster, that's a performance assessment. They changed. I mean, that used to be like, I know I've got a couple of vets out there in the call right now. It used to, I mean, every like branch of military had slightly different takes on it, but it used to be like push-ups. Certain branches did pull-ups, although I don't think all of them did. And then like sit-ups and a run. So it was like push-ups, sit-ups, runs, and then sometimes like pull-ups, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me if you know those standards. But now, like, I know that they changed up, like the new like Army one is way more complicated than it used to be. Let's see here, Army fitness test. I mean, it is totally different than it used to be. Is it this one? I think it is. Yeah, so they have to
Soldiers
do like
move to
I'm gonna go ahead and just blow this up and talk over it, but I think they have to do like a farmer's carry here with like a very specific like designated weight, and they have to be able to carry it like a certain. Oh no, it's actually apparently it's actual deadlifts. I thought it was a farmer's carry. So they have to do like a certain number of repetitions there. They have like a reverse soccer throw, which is what this is called here. That's part of the assessment. This is fun, by the way. Like I love a good friggin' reverse throw. You never get to do it because like you do that in the gym, you're gonna get kicked out. You know? But it's a fun exercise, and it's all about like, you know, it's basically like a really explosive posterior chain exercise. And then and then they do hand release push-ups now instead of regular push-ups. So they have to actually bring their chest to the ground, and then you see how he's lifting his palms up off the ground before he does his next rep. That's called a hand release push-up, and like that's sort of the new approach there. I do think they still have to do a specific run, but now they also have like basically the shuttle test. Oh, it's right here. Deadlift, throw, hand release push-up. Oh yeah, the sprint drag carry. That's what it is. So they have to sprint down, get to the line, come back, and then do like a reverse like drag. And then they'll do like this they got rid of the pull-ups and they turned it into like a they call it like, what do they call it, the leg tuck. And so now it's like you can just hold, you can either choose to do repetitions like this, or you can choose to hold it for a certain length of time. So like they've really changed things up. It's pretty fascinating. I will say it is also controversial. I don't know a lot of people who like this test better than the old ones. From like vets that I've talked with who are just like, yeah, no, it's way worse. But I mean, it is definitely more comprehensive. There's definitely a lot more muscle involved there, you know, and a lot more different types of athleticism. So if we want to like improve in any of those categories, we need to have like a starting point from which we record and like work from, right? And that's what our performance assessments are. So the two main ones that we're going to see for today are just going to be the Sharks test and the Davies test. Tomorrow we'll look at our strength assessments. That's going to be like 1 rep max testing protocols and things like that. But honestly, guys, other than that, that is the end of the PowerPoint so far. Any questions on the Sharks test? Any questions on the Davies test? Any questions on performance assessments in general? How to perform them, what they're for, how they're going to test you on it, anything like that?
So how many reps should we give our clients in a performance assessment?
So it's based, that's a great question. It's based on them though, right? So like the Davies test is how many touches they can get, right? So so we'll get a chance to kind of practice this and see how long this takes to, or how many touches you can get. I've had a student one time, I think the record I ever saw was like 32, which was insane. That person was moving at the speed of light. So any of you out there who are listening and are like, you know, I'll bet I could kill it on that Davies, your number to beat is 32. But I seriously, that's so fast. That's like, I mean, that's a touch per like half second. It's crazy. But it's based on them, right? So if they're moving like wham, 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 like really, really quick, they're going to get a lot of touches. The Sharks test is how long it takes them to get through the course almost, right? So like if they're standing on one hip, standing on one leg, and they jump like this, right? And it's like, and then they get back into the center box, right? And then they're really struggling, and then they get their next rep. You know, if that's how long it's taking them, that's fine. You know, we're going to record that. But other times, you know, they're gonna get better and better and better at it, and it's gonna look, you know, maybe a little bit faster, something like that, where they're just knocking out reps and they get through the whole thing, you know, really, 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 really quickly.
I have a question.
Yeah, everybody's going to be a little different.
When you do the assessments, like how often or how long after the person, say they did poorly on the assessment, how long after that would you do like another assessment after regular training to show them that they've improved?
Yeah, so it's the same concept as like any other type of assessment. You don't want to like redo inches, for instance, like every week. You know, like if you're testing like circumference measurements every week, it's a lot. It's a lot for a couple different reasons. It's a lot because like all of a sudden your training becomes super number based, which then like your client can kind of hurt your client's self-esteem and make them really kind of get into their own head and negative ways. Just like you don't want to weigh yourself every single day if you're very obsessive about your weight, you know?
So do you do like a 12-week thing or?
So in general, what we recommend is anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
I like every like 4 to 6 weeks personally. But that's also because like I love like a good theme. I think like themes are a really good way. I never get to talk about this, by the way. Like this isn't in your books at all. But I love themes. I love like the idea of like focusing on one central thing for like a specific given time and like being super committed to it over the course of like, you know, January 1st to January 31st, and then February 1st to February 28th or whatever, right? Like I love that approach, because like it's like, all right, like here's our next, or like I'll do like 4 weeks, like this Monday to 1, 2, 3, 4 the next Monday, and it's like, all right, Arlene, you and we are gonna get your Davies test improved. So I'm gonna write a program, and like I get you fired up about it, and you're like, yeah, let's get the Davies test better. I don't know why I care, but yeah, I'm gonna get super into it, right? And so then like I write a program, and priority number 1, I'm going to focus on all the posture stuff that we talked about. But if I've got the choice of between, if I'm trying to pick like a core stabilization exercise, and I've got a choice between like a plank or like a plank with shoulder tapping, I'm probably going to pick the plank with shoulder tapping because it's already good for the core stabilization that I wanted anyways. But it's the version of it that's going to help you improve in this thing that we're focusing on for the next 4 weeks, and it's just a really great way to motivate clients. I did, when I taught a boot camp, I used to do like little themed workouts for my boot camps all the time, for people who were like stoked on stuff. And so like when the Avengers movie was coming out, for instance, like the first Avengers, I did like an Avengers themed workout for like 4 straight weeks. And it was all movements that they were totally the normal movements, but I named them after the Avengers. You know what I mean? And like that motivated my clients. They thought it was so silly and dorky, but fun and engaging, right? They all still worked towards their goals, but they also got to have a good time while they were doing it. And then the next 4 weeks, I remember, I think that was like, did they come out and say the Hunger Games was nearby? I remember doing like a Hunger Games workout for a while. Release date, it's 2012. Avengers release date, 2012. Yeah, those were the same summer. So I remember having, I brought in, so Alexis, I brought in, we basically played kind of what it was kind of like playing beer pong in a weird way, but I brought in like little cups, and like ping pong balls, and what everybody had to do is I lined everyone up, and you had to plank, and then like down the line, starting with the first person, they had to get up and they had to shoot until you made it into the cup, and then get back, and then get back into a plank, and so like the next person would go, and the next person would go. And like they all had to do it, and so like everyone's cheering each other on. They're like, "Go get it in there!" Like they keep missing, and like let me tell you, it wasn't far away, but you think it'd be very easy to make one little shot. But like when a bunch of people are like, "We're all planking and dying, get it in the box," like it makes it much more challenging. So that was like a 4-week theme that I would have, right? And then everybody gets stoked, and a couple of people went and saw the movie together, which is fun because then that builds community between your members and stuff. But like I would say, Arlene, the actual like textbook answer is anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, because you can stay on one program for an 8-week length. I think that's a little short. Or I'm sorry, I think the opposite of short. I think it's a little long. Not physiologically. I think that like 8 weeks is still plenty of time without worrying about plateauing or anything like that. I think you don't have to worry about, I will do the same routine for 8 weeks in a row. But I love to do like an assessment reminder at the end of every month, or every 6 weeks. That's where my comfort zone is. NASM's gonna say 4 to 8. Yeah. All right, so no more slides. Let's take a look at some overactive, underactive muscles, shall we? So we are looking at here, if we go to, not that, I'm like opening up the internet and it's right here on my computer. Let's take a look at some of our upper body dysfunction here, right? So we have looked so far at when it comes to postural distortions, right? We go to that postural distortion cheat sheet that's online, which is here. We have done the feet turn out. We've done the knees cave in. We've done the excessive forward lean. We've done the low back arch. What we haven't done yet is the arms falling forward, shoulders elevating, and head falling forward, right? So we haven't seen what happens if during a pushing and pulling assessment, we see a client do this, right? Where they're reaching with the head, or like, you know, where they're raising up the shoulders like this. We haven't actually looked at any of that yet. And we haven't looked at what happens, you know, if we've got a client during the overhead squat, if they literally just like can't keep their arms up, right? You know, they've got this like alteration in posture here where we're seeing like one arm sort of fall down, right? So how do we approach that? Like, what does it mean? What do those specific like postural distortions mean? I don't think NASM does a video. NASM shoulders elevated. I mean, they do. They've got this giant thing, but that's not the one I'm actually looking for. No, so they don't necessarily have that one yet, but I do have arms fall forward, and we'll come to that one in just a second. So let's actually, you know, we'll go ahead and start with that one. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it means to fix a client who, you know, let's say they're, you know, they should be able to keep those arms bisecting the ears, but they just got some residual tightness, and this is about as high as they can get, you know. And so when that comes down to a squat, right? If they're sitting into that squat, you can see my arms aren't lining up with my upper body, right? So here's a little sort of quick fix and how we're going to address this. It's another Rick video, which I'm a big fan of.
Hey y'all, it's Rick and Annie. We're going to be going through an upper extremity corrective exercise series, and we're probably just going to do it on one side to keep it short. So just to give you a heads up on what we're going to do. Annie, we've decided, has upper extremity postural distortion. So in an overhead squat, her arms fall forward. So we're going to do a release technique. So we're going to inhibit her lats and her pecs. We're then going to have her lengthen it. Then we're going to do an activation technique, and then we're going to do an integrated exercise to help strengthen and bring everything together. So, Annie, you ready?
Yes.
All right, come on down. Let's get that foam roller, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to have Annie go right basically into her armpit, but on the back side of it. So Annie's going to be rolling, not quite even her lats yet, but she's getting in that area with the tight muscles in the posterior side of the shoulder. And then as she rolls farther up, so the roller's coming down on her, there's a place called the scapula, right? So, or the shoulder blade. That inferior angle, that very last portion, the lats connect there, and you'll see when she hits it because she's going to make a base. All right, so when Annie feels that little portion right there, it gets to be pretty tight, and that's where a lats connection. It's a nice place to release from. So Annie, you got that spot? Now remember, we're going to do a couple of releases. We'll hold minimum of 30 seconds to let that autogenic inhibition take place, let the muscle mechanoreceptors relax themselves. And then we're going to go right into the next exercise. So Annie, let's go right into the next release. So what she's going to do, I'm going to have her roll back down a little bit. And just because I want to make sure that she's not rolling anything but muscle here, slowly now roll forward so it's right here, just at the bend of the armpit. And she's going to do a release right there of the pec major, and the pec minor also happens to be in that area. Now, this is a heads up for you. If your client, and you need to ask, don't just assume that they don't feel something. Ask your client, do you feel any numbness or tingling? If they do, that's called not good. So make sure that they don't have any tingling, any numbness, because they're on a nerve or blood supply or both. So hop off of that spot, find another spot, make sure it's only muscle. Annie, you getting a nice little release there? Fantastic. So those are our two inhibitory techniques. I'm going to have you flip right over so you're face down into a child's pose. And the child's pose is what we're going to use to lengthen those lats out, and it'll actually lengthen the pecs out as well. Now, there's multiple ways to do it, but this is the way we're going to do it. And what I've done, I have her go into this position because she stretches the lats by having a posterior tilt here. She's reaching the arm forward, and I'm going to help her just a little bit. I'm going to brace her a little bit here, and then I'm just going to roll that forward, but I'm locking her hand on there so her arm reaches forward. That way she's getting some scapular elevation, getting additional stretch in the lat here on this side. Do you feel that stretch in there, Annie? So if I wanted to get a little more of a stretch, then I could actually have her shift her backside that way. So she create like a crescent moon here, so she's lengthening the lat this direction. All right, so let's go ahead and have you come up. Let's go ahead and start some activation exercises. So come on up this way. And the activation exercise I'm going to have you do is I'll actually have you squat down a little bit, and you're going to go into your YTAs, or this is what NASM calls their combo number 1, right? So she's going to go up into a Y position, so Y. And this is a nice activation for those lower traps right here. Go ahead into your T position. Nice T position. Again, retraction, but now we have some horizontal abduction, so we're strengthening posterior delt. And then come back into your YTA position. And she's got a nice little external rotation here. She's squeezing her traps. She's retracting her shoulder blades. And you may even get folks that are really firing up in their triceps. And we're not going for this tricep activation. So if that's the case, just have them come out a little wider and squeeze back more. Good, go ahead and do another one. Y position, this exercise is called scaption. So she's doing a scaption here. Go ahead into your T, this is a reverse fly, and then let's go ahead into your A position. And if you guys are familiar with our work, this is what we do, call a floor cobra, except we're standing now, so this is a standing bent over cobra. Let's go into our combo number 2, Annie. So what she's gonna do now is she's gonna go into a row. So this is a high row, not an upright row, it's a high row. She's getting her posterior delt really active here and doing her retraction. Now she's going to rotate. She's going to do a shoulder press. Now it's really firing up these stabilizers in the scapula. Let's do a lat pull down. Good, rotate in and dive into the pool. Let's get one more. Go ahead and pull it back, rotate up, overhead press, lat pull down, rotate down, and dive into the pool. Very nice. Stand up, face towards me. Now we're going to go into our integrated exercise. So I'm going to have Annie do a squat to a high row. And again, a high row is this position, not here, because I don't want those lats continually pulling her into this kind of protracted position. So she's going to go up, bring the elbows up high, keep that upper trap area, the posterior.
By the way, that is actually a really good tip. Instead of going into major shoulder extension to come here. However, just be aware, if your client is also a shoulder elevator, going at an angle upward like that actually makes it harder to not do this. But tight lats are probably a priority. So I think that's why he's doing this specific version. Also, it's probably what they have access to. But that is a good tip, just be aware of the fact that you are kind of taken away from one, but possibly adding to the other.
I want those lats continually pulling her into this kind of protracted position. So she's going to go up, bring the elbows up high, keep that upper trap area, the posterior delt's quite active. And I'm going to give her a pull from this angle. So Annie's going to go ahead and squat. She's going to drive forward, squeeze the glutes, and then, yeah, there you are. Good. I'm going to bring it up a little bit higher. It was almost turning into an upright row. So go ahead, and that's much, much better. And you'll notice there should be a straight line between where her elbows are and the line of this. So if I come down too low, she's going into an upright row, and that's not a great position for the shoulder to be in. So we're just doing high rows. Let's give me a few more. Squeezing those glutes, hold it up at the top. And 3. Good. Abs, glutes tight. Good. Nice retraction. And one more time. Hold it. Hold it. Relax. Very nice. Cool. Thank you, Annie. And this is a nice little corrective exercise series. You guys go back through and make sure you look at this is the highlighted version of it. So make sure you go back through. You make sure you get both sides if both sides are affected, and then put this stuff to use. All right. Thanks again.
Okay. So that is with an arms fall forward situation. Let's take a look and review some of these muscles here real quick, right? So let's say we see it, you know, our client can't necessarily get their arms up very well. So let's take a look at what muscles are going to be tight here. We are going to see the Latissimus Dorsi again, right? Again, this is that, that big, just absolutely massive muscle on like our backside there. And if you look at it, like it's in charge of pulling like this, right? Like it's gonna pull in this direction here. So it is attaching on the front of the humerus there, right? Like this comes underneath our armpit and it attaches on the front side of the humerus. So your lat does three things, okay? It is in charge of shoulder extension, which is this here, right? Shoulder extension, which makes sense. If we got a client whose arms are falling forward, yeah, the muscle that pulls the arm down like this is probably really, really tight. It is also in charge of internal shoulder rotation. So my palm's facing forward. Now my palm's facing, you know, backwards, right? So I'm internally rotating my shoulder there. And then it's in charge of adduction of the shoulder as well. So when you think of like, you know, adducting, which is pulling down this way, if I did that with bent elbows, that's a pull-up, right? And that's why the pull-up works the lat so effectively. So that is how this muscle is going to effectively pull here. So basically, in order to stretch it, we are going to do the opposite of all those things, right? You know, you'll notice like a lot of people will do like this version here where they'll just kind of like grab something. It's not bad, you know. What's great about like the reason this stretch actually kind of works is because like the arms very much in shoulder flexion, which is going to, you know, stretch this out underneath here. Because again, this muscle wants to pull it this way, right? Into extension. So we take it into massive shoulder flexion there, and that's going to stretch it. It also allows you to kind of drop your butt down at the bottom a little bit. This is going to be one of the very rare circumstances where we actually like, instead of having like a neutral low back, we actually like a little bit of low back rounding. I know that like as trainers, we are just constantly telling our clients not to round their low back. But in this case, it actually helps a little bit because if you look, you can see like where this is grabbing, you know, it comes along this whole, you know, ridge here. So when you can posteriorly tilt this just a little bit, right? If you can kind of like scoop the low back away, it actually gives you a little bit of a deeper stretch in your lat, because again, you're pulling it end to end. This is one of my favorites. I just saw a picture of like my favorite lat stretch actually. This version right here, they call this a prayer stretch. Now she is dropping her chest down, which kind of not what we're going for there. But I do like, you know, I'm just gonna pull up a different picture. So there we go. That's a little bit more of like a neutral spine. But this prayer stretch here, one of my favorite lat stretches. You can also do that with like a resistance band or a PVC pipe or a broomstick. That's also going to help stretch that out very effectively. And because this is also a little, one of the reasons why this is a little bit better than just like your traditional, like, and child's pose, by the way, also a little bit of lat stretch. But the reason I like this one is it with a barbell? No, okay. The reason I like this one in particular so much is because it actually allows you to bend your elbows. And if you look at like where this muscle's attaching again, by bending the elbows, you're actually going to stretch your triceps, which would be running along all of this. And if you look at the fascia there, see if I can find a good picture of all this. It's going to be tough to Google. Oh, come on, so close. I just need more arm. There we go. All right. So if you see this picture here, you can see there's all like the triceps. So like by bending your arm, you're actually stretching the triceps, which kind of share some of this like fascia with the lat there. So it actually gets a little bit of a deeper stretch by bending the elbow, which you wouldn't actually get from a lot of like straight arm lat stretches, which are mostly what we see. The one that's going to be in your textbook, the most popular lat stretch in your textbook is going to be the ball lat stretch, which is this one here. And again, this is taking our arm into, you know, shoulder flexion. He's got his arm fully up overhead, right? And he's going palm up towards the ceiling. By going palm up towards the ceiling, you are in a slight external rotation. That slight external rotation is very, very helpful because, again, the lat does internal rotation. So that's going to be probably the biggest one to shut down if your client has a really hard time getting arms overhead. For the record, anybody in here who's ever goofed around with getting better at like your rack position? If you're doing like, you know, hang cleans or anything like that, where you're just like getting a barbell into a rack position here, and you've noticed that you know, have a really hard time with that flexibility. A lot of people will jump and say, oh, you need more wrist flexibility so that you can, you know, rest the barbell in your palm back there. And while I think working on your wrist flexibility is good and it is important, when it comes to your rack position, you can see here, obviously, yes, that is a lot of like wrist mobility, but a lot of times the reason people struggle with this is not so much their wrists as much as it is really tight lats. And so they're sort of trying to hold here while their lats pulling down like this. And then your wrist has to further flex. So like your wrist is trying to compensate for like really tight lat muscles. So anybody in here who's interested in getting into like Olympic weightlifting, I really recommend like getting that mobility in your lats. It's very, very, very helpful. Next one we're going to see that's very tight is one of our more confusing muscles. This is going to be our teres major, which is a little tiny muscle that runs from the back side of the scapula onto the front side of the humerus there, right? So I'll go ahead and let's just go ahead and zoom in on this here, right? So this one is running, again, it's kind of a same situation, right? It's going to run its way up here, and then it goes like under the armpit, and it grabs the front of the humerus, which we can't really see from this backside. So it starts on the backside, runs to the front side, which means, whoops, no. Which means it is going to internally rotate the arm, right? Like it's threading back here, grabbing the front side here, right? So when it pulls, it's pulling into internal rotation. So anytime you're doing this, you're working that teres major, which you think about like throwing, right? Anything where you're doing sort of a front hand throw. And then think about like how often you're walking with your palms like this, right? It makes sense that this is a very, very, very tight overactive muscle. So if our client is supposed to be doing an overhead squat and they're supposed to have their arms up like this, and that teres major is really tight, it will internally rotate, which makes it harder. You know, it internally sort of swings the humerus this way, which would make it much, much, much harder for us to be able to, you know, keep the arms up overhead. Next one on the list we're going to see as overactive is going to be the pectoralis major. So we are going to switch to the other side of the body here. Our pectoralis major, you know, your major chest muscles here. Actually, that's not what I want to do. Trying something new today where I'm going to line these all up at the same time. Seeing if I can get this as a better example here. So this muscle, very kind of cool muscle, actually, your pecs, you can see is going to you know, you've got like very many different sets of fibers here. Like look at these fibers that are coming from the top, and then like it comes down and inserts there. And the bottom side comes from here and inserts there. So this actually makes kind of a twist. It's like bow tie pasta, you know? Obviously the whole thing is just going to pull straight towards the middle like this. You know, it is obviously in charge of horizontal adding to my midline adduction, yes. But again, it does a little bit of, you know, imagine raising this bone. Now imagine raising your arm up this way, right? If you do that, the top fibers here, this top section of fibers is going to pull that up. So like your clavicular head is what we call that, because this is our clavicle, right? So your clavicular head is a little bit in charge of shoulder flexion. So you would think that that would make us better at raising our arms up overhead, but look at how small the clavicular head is. It's not exactly a large chunk of our pecs there, right? You've got a lot more that is sort of in charge of the shoulder extension, like pulling down this way or pulling the arm forward this way. So again, when we try to take our arms up overhead, we start to really struggle here because these really tight pec muscles are sort of pulling us, you know, forward like this, right? It wants to pull the arms this way. And gets very, 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 very tight there. So that's our pectoralis major. That's going to be a big tight muscle. And then last on the list here is our pectoralis minor. So the pec minor, it's funny that it's a pectoral muscle, but it really has, so, I mean, it's honestly as if it's not even associated with the pec major. It's almost like, you know, it does a completely different thing in its own way. Why is that one bigger? So we zoom in on this one here. This one lives underneath our pectoralis major. Now look at the difference here, right? Look at how this one is, this is a bone that grabs the humerus. And then you see this little hook right here, that's our coracoid process. That's what our pec minor grabs. It lives underneath, doesn't even touch the humerus. Not in charge of humeral anything. So the pec minor does not help with chest flies or chest presses, which is the same thing, right? It doesn't help with incline chest presses or dips. It actually does kind of help with dips, but it doesn't really help with any of that sort of traditional chest stuff. But it does grab our scapula right here, okay? So it is grabbing our scapula. So what it does is the shoulder protraction, right? And you can feel it. Place your hand, right? You got your, like where your deltoid kind of comes in. Your deltoid muscle, by the way, will probably run right about to here. So like imagine if that's your deltoid there. So just roll your fingers right off the deltoid onto your pecs there. You can even feel, if you really kind of dig, you'll feel that little knob. You'll feel this knob right here, the coracoid process. And so like your pec minor is just below that, and it's running and it's grabbing these three ribs right here, right? So that's what it's responsible for. So what it does, if you just hold that and pull here, you'll feel it squeeze, right? It may take a little bit to like find the right spot, but dig around a little bit and you will feel it does protraction. Now, you guys just try to protract and raise your arms overhead. It's impossible. You'll find that you won't be able to do it. So those are definitely our four major overactive muscles here, right? So these are all overactive. I'm zoomed out. Very tight muscles here. I should have put this like this. Yep. And then, huzzah. So then obviously we've got overactive muscles on one side of the joint. We need to look at our underactive muscles on the other side of the joint. So we are going to see our middle trapezius muscles as underactive here. So middle trap muscles. And I do want to find We'll go ahead and separate these out ourselves. I'm going to stick with the Ken Hub theme today. You guys know I love a theme. So we'll put this over here. All right, so here is our trapezius muscles, right? So I'll go ahead and just kind of copy that. So we're going to see underactivity in the middle section here, right? So that's going to mostly be this section right here, right? The middle traps are going to run to about here, here, down, maybe like this section right here, and back up, right? So that's our middle trapezius, okay? That's in charge of scapular retraction. Look at where it's grabbing, right? It's going to pull in like that. That's the scapular retraction we're looking for. Now, just try to round your, so it's working against the pec minor there, right? So just round your shoulders, try to raise your arms overhead. You'll notice you can't. And now just try to like retract your shoulders and raise your arms up overhead. Focus on one thing, guys. Like get your arms overhead, but really just focus on retracting. You will notice, look at how much easier that is. I can bring my arms all the way behind my ears, right? If I really just focus on retracting more than I'm doing anything else and just pulling my shoulder blades together, it makes it so much easier to raise the arm up overhead. So that's the middle trapezius, right? That's the section we want to strengthen. And then we also want to work on the lower trapezius. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste this again. And we'll put that over here. The lower trapezius is also going to be underactive here. And that's these fibers here, right? This is like this section down here, right? Ooh, that's not how that, just a triangle. So now those two sections, those two separate sets of fibers there are underactive, right? These we want to work a lot more. And again, their job is to do pretty much the same thing. They're going to pull down, but you'll notice I'm not drawing this arrow. Like I'm not pulling straight down only. I'm pulling down and back. So, you know, if I've got the middle traps pulling this way and this way simultaneously, we're pulling the whole scapula into retraction there, right? This may be like, you know, simple, just straight up retraction here. And then this version, whoops, is retraction and downward elevation of the scapula, right? Because it's pulling the scapula sort of down while it's also pulling back, which is great because like that is, that's going to tilt the front of it upwards, getting me, you know, able to raise that arm up overhead. So both sides of our trapezius muscles are underactive there. So you can see why it's going to be so important for us to focus on a lot of movements that retract our shoulder blades back, a lot of rowing actions, right? A lot of arm raising actions where I can focus on pinching my shoulder blades back while I do it. We'll see the rhomboids as underactive here, no surprise there. The rhomboid muscles just living between the shoulder blades, guess what? Also a scapular retractor. Uh-oh. It finally happened. We ran into a different sized image. And yet, so here is our rhomboids here. They're going to be underactive, right? And they're in charge of, you know, just like we see, again, scapular retraction. They do a little bit, you know, they do kind of pull a little bit this direction. There's actually two sets of fibers here. You've got your rhomboids, you know, little tiny set of fibers at the top. They really do a lot of the upward pull. But again, this is a scapular retractor. So when you've got your, you know, middle trapezius here pulling straight back like this, and you've got these pulling back like that, they're both working together to pull the shoulder blades back. So again, a very commonly underactive muscle that we're trying to get working there, you know. And then lastly on our list of straight up muscles, we're going to see the posterior deltoid. So your posterior deltoid is working directly opposite of your lats here. Lats, directly opposite of your pecs here. Oh no. Come on, I've had a Ken Hub picture for everything today. Give me one more. Oh, they're just putting all the deltoids together. I hate it when they do that. That's what just happened with the traps. All right, deltoids, Ken Hub. All right, so you do have 3 sets of deltoids here. That's so sad. We had this like perfect setup all morning. All right, so here's the posterior section of fibers. We'll just copy this one. Looks slightly different, but it is what it is. All right. That slightly. All right, so here's your deltoid. Now, this posterior section is this section right here. It's basically going to run to about here-ish, I'd say, and then down. It's like this section of fiber. So it's in charge of pulling into horizontal abduction, right? So this muscle pulls back. It's the reverse fly. So your pec was in charge of the fly. This is in charge of the reverse fly, right? So the pulling back, right, like that. It also does a little bit of shoulder extension there. Doesn't do any scapular retraction because it's not grabbing the spine, but it's basically grabbing the humerus and pulling it straight backwards there. So you can think of it as like this direction or this direction, right? Obviously, that's the direction of the fibers are traveling. But that's how our posterior deltoid sort of works. And then lastly, we've got our rotator cuff. And the rotator cuff is actually a group of muscles here. So the rotator cuff is a little bit more complicated. We're actually going to see a large group of muscles here. So without going into every single one of these individually, you can see here, this is known as your supraspinatus. So this ridge, just as a quick, the scapula by itself from the back side, not the front side, almost. Okay, fine. Spine of the scapula. So here's your scapula here. This ridge right here is known as the spine of the scapula. So if you are above that spine, we call that you'd be superior to the spine because you're above it. So this is the supraspinatus muscle, okay? Lives on top of the spine of the scapula there, right? That muscle runs across. It helps a little bit with shoulder abduction. So it does a little bit of the shoulder raise, just like your medial delt. We go to our deltoid here. This section of fibers, right, would be in charge of abduction, whereas the backside fibers are in charge of horizontal abduction, right? So regular old abduction is going to happen with the medial deltoid. That's the middle deltoid, right? And then we'd have the anterior deltoid on the other side. So anterior, medial, posterior. So your supraspinatus, which lives up here on this section, runs across underneath the spine there, and it grabs right here. You just can't see it because it's kind of covered up by the deltoid there. So there it is, right? Grabbing that section. So that's going to be underactive. So we'll go ahead and put that over here. I'm going to keep this one kind of smaller because this will be the rotator cuff. And the rotator cuff, we'll just get its kind of smaller section there. Slightly bigger than that, so we can't actually see it. So there's our rotator cuff, supraspinatus. Then we've got this one here. Now you'll notice, guys, pay attention to the drawing here. We've moved to the front. We're actually seeing the front of the arm here. So like your biceps would be on this side, right? Your pectoral muscles will be covering this up, but we removed the rib cage and stuff, right? We got rid of the rib cage so we can see this muscle. So this lives on the other side, like this here, flip to the other side of the scapula, which we wouldn't be able to see. We're on the front anterior view of the scapula. We just removed the rib cage, okay? Where did the pectoral picture go? Maybe it's there. Yeah. So if we just removed this pectoral, right, you would see like the front side of the scapula there. You can kind of see it peeking behind the pec minor there. So there's a muscle that lives along that. That is known as your scapularis. It lives, it's hidden under the scapula. That's what that name kind of means. Because if you look from the backside, you wouldn't be able to see it, right? So it's grabbing, it's going to run across right here. It does a little bit of scapular protraction, okay? So it's in charge of like doing this action here, rounding the shoulders forward. That's a muscle that's supposed to round the shoulders forward. Generally, the pec minor kind of does all of it. So that one's going to be there. Copy that, put it over here in the tiny list. I need to make you smooth. And then let's just kind of delete the bottom of the humerus there. All right, so there's that one, part of the rotator cuff list. Then we've got this one right here, which is known as your infraspinatus. So this one is inferior to the spine of the scapula. Remember, we had our supraspinatus, which was superior to the spine of the scapula. This is the infraspinatus, inferior to the spine of the scapula. So this one's below it, right? And this is a scapular external rotator, right? So like external rotation, which obviously this poor little tiny muscle is working against our lats, which is an internal rotator. It's also working against that teres major, which was an internal rotator. So that's a much smaller one there that has to work against, a much larger muscle. Then we got the last one here. So I already did that one, right? Yeah. You know what? I'm going to use this picture. No, I'm not. Go back. So this one is our Teres Minor. Okay, so the Teres Minor here. Oh, I need to make that bigger. Teres Minor lives in the same place as our teres major. It runs and grabs the back. It's also in charge of external rotation. So the two external rotators are the infraspinatus and the teres minor. Those are really underactive in somebody who has excessive shoulder rounding, because they are spending all day, thumbs facing towards themselves, kind of rounding forward like this, right? So we need to work on that external rotation, right? We want to pull that arm straight back into external rotation. That is definitely something we are looking for here, right? So a lot of cable external rotations, just like this or like this, anything where we're swinging the arm open is going to be huge here. So these four muscles are the rotator cuff muscles that we really want to work on. Let's make that just a bit bigger. Right, so that's kind of a group there all by itself, and all of this kind of falls into our underactive category, right? So we'll label this whole side over here underactive. Okay, pretty big list of muscles for us to kind of work on, So overactive muscles we are going to see are the lats, due to the excessive extension of the arm, as well as internal rotation. The teres major, which is an internal rotator. And by the way, teres major, right? Notice how it looks just like the teres minor, right? It kind of starts in the same place here. right there, and then grabs the front of the humerus. That's why it internally rotates, versus the teres minor, which starts just below it, but grabs the back of the humerus. That's why it does external rotation. So they kind of work like this, right? One grabs the front, one grabs the back, and they spin the humerus like that. Meanwhile, infraspinatus also grabbing the back, subscapularis grabbing the front. By the way, the subscapularis is the one that's supposed to do most of the internal rotation, but unfortunately the teres major kind of takes over, and the lats kind of take over, just because those two muscles just, you know, get used a lot more when our shoulders are elevated. So tight muscles, lats, teres major, pecs, both major and minor. Underactive muscles, middle trapezius, lower trapezius, rhomboids, posterior deltoid, and the rotator cuff. I'll go ahead and label this rotator cuff. Oh, that whole sort of group of muscles here. Questions on any of those muscles? Questions, comments, concerns. It's a pretty big list. The rotator cuff is a list. By the way, when you are testing, they will say rotator cuff. They actually won't give you they won't make you break down the list, okay? Which is great. Makes life way easier. Just remember, the only distinction you need to make is do not consider the teres major, even though it lives right there, where all the other rotator cuff muscles live. Don't consider it part of the rotator cuff. Okay, it's not an official on rotator cuff muscle, even though it's like right here.
Right.
Yes.
I was gonna ask you, is it too much for you? Like you put all the muscle name that you just said underneath them?
Yeah, it is. I mean, no. I mean, no, it is not too much.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go.
I don't want to ask you.
Yeah, Latissimus Dorsi. Let me just try to make them fit as best as possible. You know what? Here, hold on.
That means we have like a,
Yeah.
the name and the muscle all at the same time.
And we'll put this one up instead of down. Okay, so giving these names. This is the Latissimus Dorsi. This one over here is the teres major. This one over here is the pectoralis major, or pec major. Whatever. What everybody's gonna say. That's 1L. This one here is the pectoralis minor, the tiny one. This is, by the way, pec minor is the real big bad guy. Like on our list of, like, you know, as the muscles go, that's the real jerk muscle there. This one here is the middle trapezius. Why is this box so big? I wish it wasn't doing this. Middle trapezius. This one's the lower trapezius. This one is the rhomboids. No, I missed. Ugh. Gotta do that one. Rhomboids. This one is the posterior deltoid. And then we got in the rotator cuff here, we have the supraspinatus. Do you guys remember when we were talking a little bit about the shoulder clicking? That's the supraspinatus muscle, by the way. Let me just zoom in here real quick, take a quick little pause. See how this muscle runs between the collarbone and then the spine of the scapula? It goes underneath that. If this muscle starts grinding on the top of that little hook there, so if it starts grinding right here, that's the clicking that you're feeling when you feel that shoulder click.
That means it's overactive because I feel it.
No, it actually doesn't. It means that there are overactive muscles, but it's probably this list over here. It's these muscles. But what's happening is this muscle is getting pinched because of it. Doesn't mean that the supraspinatus is overactive. It actually means all those other muscles are overactive, particularly big bad actually isn't on this particular list. If you got the click, it's this muscle, the upper parts of the traps. The upper trapezius is drawing you like this, and that's why it's getting pinched in between.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually more, I shouldn't say it's a problem with this. It's the other muscles we're gonna see today. It's the shoulders elevate muscles. And then this is Teres Minor, is gonna be underactive. And then we've got the subscapularis. That's a weird name, but it is it's it's hidden behind the back of the scapula. Like I can't, you like see this one on the right here. This is our infraspinatus, inferior to the spine of the scapula, right? But you know, we're on both sides of the scapula here, right? So again, those muscles are also kind of like subscapularis would be here, infraspinatus would be here. They're both grabbing the humerus, doing this, you know, just like the Teres muscles were. So that's our overactive, underactive list. Yeah, of course, happy to. You guys can get a screenshot of that.
I'm trying to do, that's why.
Yeah. Where was I? So yeah, so now we've got our list. All we have to do is write a routine that is going to address this list, right? So this is supposed to be over here. Let's go ahead and zoom in on it here. So here's the routine we wrote, right? If we've got the arms falling forward, we need to loosen up. Now, I will say I did put the SMR on the upper trapezius here. That's actually not on our list, right? Like the upper traps aren't causing the arms fall forward. But they do cause the forward head posture, which often comes along with arms falling forward. And when it comes to foam rolling the upper traps, you know, we see people doing like this one here. It's that classic, like sort of like roll that we did with the foam roller the other day. And look, a lot of people take their arms up afterwards while they're doing it, right? So is it still a good one to do? Yeah, in my opinion, right? I'm definitely going to include that in there. Probably the biggest, most important one to foam roll, though, is going to be that Latissimus Dorsi, right? Get in there with the lats and foam roll, loosen that freaking lat muscle up because it is tight. I did put the pec minor on here as well. You're probably not going to be able to use a foam roller on that, but a lacrosse ball placed in just the right spot, right? Actually, that's a great picture. I love that. Placing that just on that coracoid process right there can be really, really helpful. So just, you can see this one, she's doing it as she's like laying down. You can do that. You can press it. What the? Look at this. Click the thing and then this, what? You're annoying, internet. There we go. Pressing it right there using like a wall can also be really effective. Anything where you're kind of digging into that pec minor is really going to help a lot. Then we're going to do the ball lat stretch. I only picked that one because that's the one that's in your textbook. Like I said, I actually like the prayer stretch better. But a ball lat stretch is going to be a really good one to loosen up the lats. The static pectoral wall stretch, you guys will remember that one from the other night when we were at Sochi, right? I will say she's going straight out. I think she would raise her arm 6 inches higher. So instead of coming to here, just up here. That's a little bit better to get into both fibers of the pec there. And then I threw in an upper trapezius stretch here because I think it belongs on the list, right? Loosening that up so that we can allow our other trap muscles to work a little bit more effectively. And then here's a teres major stretch. Now, this isn't in your book, but this is going to be a good one. Remember, the teres major is in charge of internal rotation. So we are going to do external rotation. So this version right here, which is more commonly known as like a tricep stretch, is very, very good for the teres major, because if you actually look at what's happening here, that's external rotation. Another really good one is this version here. If you have a client who can't get their arm, right, if they have a really hard time like getting into that posture, what you can do, I just happen to have a towel with me. Unfortunately, it's a friggin' bath towel. But what you can do is you can actually drop that behind, and now I can grab with my other hand, and that can pull my arm down for me. So that can do that tricep stretch for me if I have like limited mobility. You can use a yoga strap, which is actually what I recommend to do that as well. Yoga strap. Let's see if I find a picture of that. Yoga strap triceps stretch. Ha. You can do this version. So by pulling with this arm, you know, she's going to be stretching this one, and she's in external rotation, right? So her palms facing her head, external rotation there. So that's a really good teres major stretch because the teres major wants to do internal rotation. Love that stretch. So we do that, and then get our client nice and, you know, get the right muscles turned on, get the right muscles turned off. That should say Cobra, not Corba. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the Isoprone Cobra here, just like we did yesterday for the client who like excessively leans forward. Well, this one's going to be a really good one. Not so much because, yes, it is an erector spinae exercise, but more importantly for this client, it is a scapular retraction exercise. So we are activating, we're getting right in to the rhomboids. We're getting right in to the middle and lower trapezius, and then a little bit of posterior delt there, but not much. And then you'll notice while she's doing this, do you guys see how like her palms are face up a little bit? She's bringing her thumbs more towards the ceiling. She's not bringing her pinkies towards the ceiling. She's externally rotated. So now we are also working on the rotator cuff, right? We're getting those external rotators, particularly the Teres Minor and the Infraspinatus. Both of those external rotators are working the way we want to. And that's what we're going for. So the prone cobra is honestly the perfect exercise here. It was really good yesterday to work on the erector spinae. It's still doing that, but now it is also giving us all that external rotation that we love. Meanwhile, we're also going to go back to the bird dog again, that quadruped opposite arm, opposite leg raise, right? Notice how she's got her thumb up towards the ceiling. That's external rotation, right? She's alternating. You don't have to alternate. You can just finish all the reps on one side and then switch. I think alternating is like, even my knees, I'm like, this is high impact. But that's a good one. Now we went with the single leg lift and chop again, right? Raising opposite arm. Again, why is this exercise so good? Well, it's a balance exercise, which is exactly what we want. We want a balance exercise somewhere in our movement prep to get the feet turned on, to get the core turned on, to get the neuromuscular activity, right? But now I'm focusing on raising the arms overhead. What's that doing? It's stretching my lats. Perfect, right? And then our reactive exercise, this isn't really going to have much to do with the rotator cuff, but we'll just go ahead and do like a little bit of a cone jump.
I personally love using drop.
a little bit of a cone jump to stabilization here. This is just to have a reactive exercise in the routine. Doesn't really have anything to do directly with what we're working on today. So he's just going to jump forward and he's going to stabilize and hold his landing. And there we go, right? That's a cone jump to stabilization. I only put that in there so that we would have a reactive exercise. So again, we've got a really good rotator cuff exercise here. We got a really good rotator cuff and low trap exercise here. We've got a really good scapular stabilizer here. And then we got a little bit of like reactivity to just kind of get the glutes and everything fired up, because chances are everybody needs at least a little bit more glute work, you know? So that is we went with sort of 2 core exercises, 1 balance and 1 reactive exercise pre-workout to really get everything turned on. Any questions on that, guys? Questions, comments, concerns? Muscles, exercises?
I'm good here.
Yeah, anybody else? All right. Would you stop? All right. People throw, I swear, people are like, you know what the best time to put Brad instead of a group thread is? Whenever he's in class. I know I'm making that up in my head, but it feels like everybody's coordinating. All right. Let's look at the forward head posture. So this we've already seen. We did talk about this, but remember the pushing and pulling assessment, we do see that scapular elevation and forward head posture. So during the push and pulling assessment, the forward head posture, this is going to be the exact same list, guys, that we saw in upper cross syndrome, except it's just neck only. Upper cross syndrome was sort of like putting arms fall forward and forward head posture together, right? Like we've seen all of these muscles on this list when we met at Sochi last time, right? We looked at the upper traps, levator scapula, sternocleidomastoid, those are the neck muscles, right? And then we looked at the pecs. The only thing we were missing was the lats, right? And then, but even I was like, the lats belong. Remember, I was like, the lats belong on this list. So here's just the next stuff here. We're going to see overactivity in the levator scapula, right? Remember, the levator scapula is that little muscle in the back there that elevates the scapula, right? So definitely an overactive muscle here, you know, in charge of pulling that straight up. So that's going to be the levator scapula, right? Drives that scapula straight up overhead. Obviously makes a lot of sense considering that, you know, what we're looking at is a client whose shoulders elevate. We also see the upper trapezius, right? So again, that trap muscle showing back up again as overactive, only this time it's the upper fibers. So upper trapezius here, I'll go ahead and distinguish those. That's going to be this, oops. It's going to be this section of fibers, right? That's primarily responsible here. So that is the upper trapezius. Very tight, very overactive there. Again, a scapular elevator. So those are our overactive muscles for the shoulders elevating. And then for the shoulder, for the forward head posture, we see the levator scapula show up again, you know? So as this comes up like this, which is what the levator scapula does, the head naturally comes forward. And that's why we see too much of that there. And then lastly, on our overactive list, we see the sternocleidomastoid. There it is. Why is it called that ridiculous name? Well, it's attached at the sternum, clavicle, and then where it inserts is known as your mastoid process. It's right here. It's where your masseter is. which is in charge of chewing your food, which we call mastication. And that's it for the jaw. Any more questions about the jaw and I'm out. I know, like if it doesn't move the most of the skeletal system in the gym, I don't remember any of that anatomy. So that's the sternocleidomastoid, right? Very tight muscle there, bringing our head forward. You can feel that under the neck there. So these are our overactive muscles here. So very much our list of tight overactive muscles that need to be stretched. And then obviously if we've got the head coming forward, we need the head to come back. If we got the scapula going up, we need the scapula to come down. So we're going to see the same muscles here on the scapular side of things for underactive. We are going to see the lower trapezius as underactive. So actually I need to go. So again, we need those lower fibers here, right? This section in particular, right? So that's the lower trapezius. That's way too big now. So that's going to be on our underactive list. I'm going to put this slightly off to the side a little bit more. We're a little too close here. I'll make sure we know the distinction. And then a pretty short list here. The other one is going to be the deep cervical flexors. So deep cervical flexors are the little tiny neck muscles. I'm going to, this picture, oh, good, they're both together. Never mind. I'm going to put the, that's actually great. Thank you, internet. So these are going to be our underactive muscles here, right? So these are sort of a group. That's the deep cervical flexors, okay? So zooming in on that, right? These muscles right here, underneath the neck, that are responsible for tucking our chin, right? So underactive there. We'll put them over here. So again, this is our underactive list. And it's a little bit of a shorter list there, right? Which is nice. So overactive is the levator scapula, upper trapezius, and sternocleidomastoid. Underactive, lower traps, and deep cervical flexors. So this is going to be a very similar program to what we wrote the other day at Sochi, right? With the forward head posture and elevated shoulders, we are going to foam roll the thoracic spine. So we're just getting into those trap muscles again, rolling on the roller, just like we did. We're probably going to do the upper trapezius, which we're going to want to use like a lacrosse ball for, or maybe a theracane, right? So we're probably going to, want to get into that top fiber there using like a lacrosse ball, tennis ball, something like that. We got the Latissimus Dorsi as overactive, right? So we're going to foam roll that, getting underneath the arms just like before. And then we are going to do some static stretches for maybe some muscles that we didn't necessarily get to foam roll. But we're going to do the levator scapula. Remember that one is in the back. So we go here and down. And we stretch that out right here. We're going to go to the side and get the upper trapezius, and we're going to go up and get the sternocleidomastoid. So those are three big ones for the forward head posture. And then we're going to get that lat stretch in there, just because honestly, like, get the lat stretch in there. I know it's not like officially on the list here as overactive, but again, it's an internal rotator, it's a protractor, and so many people need it. So just get the ball lat stretch or maybe the prayer stretch to get that loosened up. Because we only had 3 muscles to really focus on here, and I really do like kind of having at least 4 stretches. That's more of just like, you can tell that's me writing this program where I'm like, I need the 4. And then we got 4 primary exercises, 2 core, 1 balance, and 1 reactive exercise. So we're going to go with marching as our core exercise here. I don't know why I expected that to come up. Marching, really simple, looks just like this. You're going to keep the head planted on the floor, and you're going to raise 1 leg at a time, just like this. Not exactly the hardest core exercise in the world, but it's a really good opportunity. You know, she's not doing too much of it, but she can focus on tucking the chin, getting those deep cervical flexors active while they're getting a little bit of core work. I know it's not crunchy. I know it's not the best, most hardest exercise in the world, but that's okay. We'll get into hard stuff, you know, in later parts of the routine. We're going to go with floor prone cobra again. Again, working on the lower trapezius there. We're going to go with the single leg windmill for our balance exercise. This is a lot harder than it seems. And you're going to go here. So she's focusing on learning how to like stabilize while she moves through this full range of motion, right? I think somebody was asking about the single leg windmill at one point. I think that would be another really good one. You could go here to here. That windmill would be a really good exercise as well. But we're focusing on like stabilizing and just simply moving sort of back and forth there, balancing, and it gives us an opportunity to work on keeping our neck tucked and keeping our shoulders down. If we notice that while they're balancing and they're getting like tense and they're worried about losing their balance, they start raising their shoulders up, gives us an opportunity to focus on that scapular depression. And then I did another cone jump exercise as the reactive. Again, this one, you know, maybe the other one I do lateral, right? Last time, you know, when they did the cone jump, he jumped forward. This time I'll just have him jump to the side. So that is sort of 2 example routines there, both really good for working on that upper body dysfunction. So with the arms fall forward, we're going to see this list here. You know, overactive is going to be the lats, and then all of those internal rotators. And then the underactive is our entire external rotator section, as well as like the lower traps, rhomboids, and posterior deltoid there. So not a lot of like distinction between these two. These 2 groups are very similar, you know, in terms of like what we're working on. It's a lot of just focusing on pulling our clients' shoulders back, you know. I know the classic trainer thing is like never skip leg day, but look at how much upper body dysfunction is there. I would say, hey, never skip freaking upper back day either. You know, like get that scapular retraction, get that external rotation. That stuff is huge. This is something I struggle with, you know. I don't love back exercise. I mean, I do. I just like pull-ups, which kind of makes my problems worse. I wish that I liked rowing exercises more, you know. It'd be very good for me. Because we all need just a little bit more of this. And that's it, ladies and gents. How's everybody feeling?
Pretty good.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, the list starting to make sense. We're almost all the way through. In fact, actually, we are all the way through. That is all of the overhead squat solutions table in your standard textbook. So tomorrow, we're going to go over all the stuff that shows up in Capstone. So we're going to look at some of the bonus ones tomorrow. You won't have to have those memorized for your regular test, by the way, which means they won't be in your homework. So technically, other than performance assessments, homework 4 goes out today. It's our last piece of homework, and it is all of the information that you're going to need for your final exam. So homeworks 3 and 4, you've got it all. But other than that, I'll go ahead and kill the recording here.